What's up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Strat with Matt. This is the show where I review interesting hands from around the poker world and try to dissect them from a strategic point of view. Today's hand comes from the $1 Million Cash game played over at Live at the Bike, and it's a hand between Matt Berkey, Garrett Adelstein, and of course the one and only Bill Perkins. And you know when these three guys are involved in a hand, it's gonna be spicy. So without further ado, let's hop into the action.
Perkins here, going to go to 1200, 9-6 of hearts.
4,000.
Berkey here with jacks in the small blind.
He's going to cold call because Garrett made it 4,000, so raised by 9-6. Garrett 3-bets 5-6 of spades. Garrett Berkey with a cold call of jacks.
All right, so we got ourselves a nice little 100, 200, 400 with a $400 big blind ante game going here. So I'd say stakes are reasonably high. Action starts off with my man, Bill Perkins, who opens up a 9-6 suited from under the gun. And I probably don't need to say this, but 9-6 just going to be too loose of an open from under the gun position, especially when you're at a table with a lot of aggressive opponents. You just want to let this one go. But, of course, Bill, he's just there to have some fun, so can't really blame him for opening up the 9-6 suited. Over to Garrett, who has 6-5 suited, and now this is a hand that I would generally recommend to either 3-bet or fold pre-flop. You don't really want to be calling with 6-high pre-flop, and so Garrett does go with a 3-bet. I would generally lean towards just folding it, but occasionally 3-betting it. Garrett, though, obviously a very aggressive player, and he does want to get heads up with Bill, who is a recreational player, and just play heads up in position against Bill. So not surprised to see Garrett does go for the 3-bet with 6-5 suited. Now over to Matt Berkey, who, look at him. He's got the nice little Thirst Lounge patch. Matt, you look good in a Thirst Lounge patch. He's got pocket jacks in the small blind, and this is a really interesting spot, no doubt. In general, I would recommend either 4-bet or folding from the small blind when facing a 3-bet. I don't really love cold calling 3-bets, which is ultimately what Matt does. Now, the reason I don't love cold calling 3-bets is if you cold call the 3-bet and the original raiser throws in a 4-bet, well, now you're in a really, really terrible spot. Plus, now you're just going to have to play out of position against a couple of opponents. You don't really know where you're at. You're playing in this bloated pot, and it makes it really, really difficult to play. But he does throw in the call pre-flop rather than going with a 4-bet. And I think one of the main reasons he does this is that if he 4-bets here, he's often going to get Bill Perkins to fold, and he kind of wants Bill in the pot still. Bill is one of the recreational players. He's going to have an edge over Bill, and so he does want to keep Bill in the pot. And I think that's a big sort of aspect for Matt calling here. If he 4-bets, Bill's often going to fold, Garrett's going to call, and now you're heads up against Garrett, who is an absolute monster, and you're playing really deep out of position against someone who is extremely good. So I kind of like the flat here, even though in general I would recommend either 4-bet or folding in this position. Back over to Bill Perkins with his 9-6 suited, and you know the classic saying, in for 1,200, in for 4,000, so we're off to see a flop.
Well,
And there's bottom set there for Berkey. Flush draw for Garrett.
yeah.
Maybe Garrett checks here, obviously in a 3-bet pot with a cold call. He might take a card here, and he does quick.
So we head off to a flop of ace, queen, a jack with a couple of spades out there. Matt Berkey, pretty solid flop for him as he has bottom set. Garrett with the flush draw, and Bill Perkins can hit runner, king 10 for the 3-way chop. Now, Matt decides to go with the check, as I think he probably would with any of his hands, just checking to the pre-flop aggressor. Bill Perkins obviously checking with nothing. And now over to Garrett, who has a pretty interesting decision with his 6-high flush draw. And I like his check back here, actually. If he bets and then get raised, he's in a really weird spot. You don't really want to be just calling with 6-high. And so I do like the check back here. And in Garrett's position, I think I'd rather bet with a hand like 6-5 of hearts rather than 6-5 of spades. You bet 6-5 of hearts, you get raised. Whatever, you just folded 6-high. You bet 6-5 of spades and you get raised. Now you're in this like really weird position. So I do like the checks from all three players, and we are off to a turn card.
For sure.
Turns a king. One-liner now to a 10. Not the best turn for Berkey.
Certainly not the best turn for Berkey, but he's not going anywhere. And this probably checks through again.
Yep. Garrett going to get a free shot at a spade here. Obviously, he doesn't want to catch a king or a queen unless Perkins is going to start some crazy bluff now.
Berkey would like seeing the queen or the king of spades.
Now, is Garrett going to start a bet here?
Interesting. He doesn't have, well,
He's going to bet 10,000 here. Obviously, I think Berkey's going to call, and
yeah.
Garrett, by checking back the flop. And this is going to be interesting if this misses here, if Garrett's going to go bet. So Berkey makes the call.
So we head off to a King of Diamonds turn, obviously, and not the turn card that Berkey's looking for, as he now loses to any 10x, which could certainly be in either of his opponent's ranges. Obviously, you could bet with pocket jacks here and get called by worse hands like an ace queen, a king jack type hand, all the different flush draws. But I generally do like a check in Berkey's position here. On these kind of really kind of 4 to the straight type boards, or maybe 4 to a flush, you do want to do a lot of checking as the out of position player. And if I was in Berkey's spot, I would even check with some of my 10x in this spot, just to make sure that I do have a strong checking range. Over to Perkins, who does pick up that gut shot to the 3-way chop, and look at him, he's licking his lips, thinking about that nice little juicy 3-way chop on the river. He does go with the check on the turn, which obviously makes a lot of sense considering that he's drawing stone cold dead to anything but a chop at this point. And now we head over to Garrett, who bets around 75-80% pot with the old 6-5 of spades. Now, I think that he certainly could have a lot of 10x in his range at this point. Hands like ace 10, queen 10, jack 10, pocket 10s all make a lot of sense for Garrett to have at this point. And certainly if you have a lot of value hands, you do want to mix that up with some bluffs as well. And I think 6-5 of spades makes a lot of sense as a potential bluff for Garrett. You do want to bet with something that has a little bit of equity on this board, and using 6-5 I think makes some sense. Garrett does make the bet, and over to Berkey, who I think only has one real decision at this point. Folding would be way too weak with a hand as strong as jacks, and raising I don't think makes a lot of sense on a 4 straight board with a set. So Berkey does make the call. Perkins gets out of the way with his gut shot to the chop. Look, he can't even believe that he's folding a gut shot to the chop, but we are going heads up to river. Matt Berkey versus Garrett Adelstein. 33,000 in the middle, 62,000 behind. What will the river bring?
River is the 3 of hearts. Garrett. Berkey's got 2 pot-size bets, just under 2 pot-size bets. Remember, Garrett 3-bet and checked back the flop, bet turn. And he's going to go for it, Christian. Is he going to, whoa, he's really reaching for those lavender chips there. There's 40,000.
This is interesting because on the turn.
And is that 50,000? 50,000! He takes the bet, delayed double barrel line, check back flop, bet.
This is interesting because on the turn, he was repping both the possibility of having a hand like ace king as well as kings and 10x. Now he's repping only 10x.
And Berkey folds! Garrett with the 6 high, 83,000.
They're both the same, so turn it over.
Wow.
So we get this total brick on the river, the 3 of hearts, and Berkey checks it over to Garrett, and I don't really see much of a reason for Berkey to ever be leading in this spot, and obviously I do like the check from Berkey. Now over to Garrett with his 6 high. He certainly wants to be betting. Now what size does he wants to bet with? He decides to go with a 1.5x overbet. And I don't really love this size, at least from a game theory optimal standpoint. Now, when you do have these 4 to a straight type boards, one of the reasons why you don't want to go with an overbet sizing on the river is blocker effects. So if Garrett did have a 10 in this spot, it makes it much less likely that Berkey has a 10. If Garrett doesn't have a 10, it makes it much more likely that Berkey has a 10. So on these sort of weird 4 to the straight boards, actually from a game theory optimal standpoint, you don't want to be putting in overbets because it often leads to these weird blocker effect situations. So usually what a pile solver would recommend in this spot is just going with sort of a 70% or 100% size pot bet rather than going with the overbet. Now, Garrett does decide to go with the overbet. Maybe that's just part of his strategy. Maybe he thinks that if Berkey did have a 10, he would have raised on the turn. You never know what reads players might have on each other. I'm sure Berkey and Garrett have played a lot together, so wouldn't be surprised if Garrett had some strong reads and some strong reasons to be going with the overbet on this board. But from a game theory perspective, you don't want to be going with an overbet pot on these 4 to the straight boards. Back over to Berkey, who's in a really, really terrible spot now with his jacks. Obviously, Garrett is representing 10x for value, so Berkey's hand is just a bluff catcher at this point, and I'm totally fine with a fold in Berkey's spot. When you do face these really big river bets, you don't have to defend with that many hands, and so I don't mind folding. Certainly, Berkey will have some 10x in his range that he can defend with. I don't think that you have to defend with pocket jacks in this spot, so I don't mind the fold, but look at Garrett. Getting another one through, getting another bluff through for my man Garrett Adelstein, and a nice little pot for him. Hope you all enjoyed this edition of Strat with Matt, and if you did, please leave a like and a comment down below. It really helps to grow the channel, and if you have any feedback for me, I'm totally open to any feedback or criticism down in the comments. Thank you again for joining me, and we'll see you next time.